So I want to have ultimately a really honest conversation about ReFi today and what it is and how it's supposed to work and what we deem it. It's supposed to be transformative. I don't think it's transformative yet, and I'm not sure it's on a pathway to be transformative for a variety of reasons, and that I'd love to get your thoughts and feedback on that. The issue is that we know that climate change and environmental degradation is destroying our world. It is almost, in many places of the world, making it unlivable. And those are the places at the margin. So we don't feel it here in the United States. You barely feel it in Europe. But if you're at the margin, you feel it every day. And the margins are getting bigger. And so we can sort of ignore it for a while, but nobody's going to be able to ignore it in very long. This isn't just climate change. This is biodiversity loss. This is, the physical transitions from climate. It's all of the above coming together to impact real people in real places. So remember this as we talk about the kind of things we're doing in ReFi is, are we playing in marketplaces that are kind of move money around, or are we actually impacting the lives of people on the ground? Because ultimately, it's the lives of people on the ground that either create the carbon emissions or suffer from the result. If we're not touching them, we're not really relevant with it. So I want to start and say, who has a clear picture of what ReFi is? Is anybody 100% sure that they can define what ReFi is? Well, I mean, you can know in what you accept. Like, you got it clear, Marcus?
Yeah,
Right. So, yeah. Gregory probably give the one I'm going to allude to in a second, but I think a lot of people think this is ReFi. It's a space. It's a bunch of people that are trying to do something aligned on something. And we listed companies. I can't tell whether these are ReFi companies or DeFi companies or Web3 companies or whatever, because I can't tell what they collectively do to be ReFi. I don't know. I mean, I believe it, but I don't know. I don't think ReFi is a movement. What I understand ReFi to be is a financial system that prioritizes creating long-term value for all stakeholders, including people and Earth, rather than just maximizing profit for shareholders, right? When I went to Harvard Business School in the mid-90s, we called this stakeholder management versus shareholder management. This is not a new concept. It's been studied for years, both at sort of the business school level where you talk about stakeholders, but you really mean shareholders, or in the natural capital world and all that, where you really try to define what shareholders are and how do you do it. It's a well-studied thing, but nobody's really figured out how to implement it. And I think I know why. But this, I think, is what ReFi is supposed to be.
Fine. But so, well.
What I don't want to forget is that it's about long-term value for all stakeholders, right? So it isn't just about long-term value for Earth and people. It's about all stakeholders, and that includes some of the people we like to hate. The biggest companies in the world that kind of make the world work, the banks that finance all those people, and actually the billionaires. We hate billionaires, but want to be billionaires who we hate them. These are important stakeholders that we can't forget about because they kind of run the world today. And if we ignore them and try to do an end run around them, that will fit, they just have too many resources to do that. So somehow we've got to figure out how to make sense to them and bring our world to them just as much as we need to figure out how to do what we're doing. We also need to be confident that idea that we can actually serve all stakeholders. So, I'll get to this in a second, but that it's not just a concept of serving all stakeholders, that we are reducing those people at the margin that are suffering. We have to do that. We literally have to feed another 4 billion people on top of an unjust, but pretty efficient food system that exists today. We've got to make it just and more efficient. That's no small thought. We want to build all this renewable energy. I hate to say it, we need mining. But we can't have the mining industry we have today. We need a completely different mining industry. So now we need to reinvent mining and reinvent the energy system. Those are just hard realities that we need to be cognizant of and make sure that our solutions are taking all that into account.
To realize.
So, and also the aspiration is that by promoting transparency and accountability, that will an investment that will, and democratization of the decision-making process, that it should be able to help everybody sort of see that we're doing the right thing. We now have full transparency and everybody can participate. The problem is, and Mark and I were talking about this yesterday, full transparency to what? Like, are we looking at data that is accurate or replaced? Are we looking at data that people agree on? Are we looking at Bob's data and John's looking at Fred's data, and they're actually operating off two different pieces of data? So transparency, democratization, and all this stuff are great ideals, but there's a set of infrastructure that's to operate underneath them. And especially in ReFi and Web3, I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but when I go to my MetaMask wallet and say, like, what?
And I spend money the last year. It doesn't do very work.
I don't remember why that $1,200 went out into that for. So if you're running $1 billion mining company, that doesn't work. So we have to really think about not only the fundamental tenets of what we're doing, but how our system is interoperable with the identity systems and the regulatory structure and all those in that world. Because we could be totally right and have all the money in the world, but if you can't operate with Trifigura, if you can't operate with Cargill, if you can't operate with ABN AMRO, if they don't understand, you're not interoperable with their systems or whatever, they can't take your money. They can't sell you their product. They can't move their product on your exchange. So really important that we get that infrastructure figured out. And lastly, no one's going to be happy if we're really excited about regenerative finance and they're still building as that gets started. Like a bit. The other piece that I'd like to make sure we're cognizant of. That, we talk a lot about collaboration. We're collaborating today. But I've had probably some of the most positive, open dialogues at ReFi community conversation, but it's all the same people. And it's all the same people talking about the same kind of stuff. And unless you really go out and try to find somebody that's going to tell you you're full of shit or tell you that you got it all wrong, we're not getting that. And so we have to remember that, this sort of community that we're building, which is nascent, it really does need to engage with the real economy. And it was interesting that Alan talked this morning about, getting connected with the ESG community. Like, it's amazing enough, that we're just now really getting connected and trying to figure out the carbon community, the carbon market community. Now you go to the ESG community, they're not the same. They're fundamentally different. And so we got to figure out the ESG community, but guess what? Neither of those are anywhere near the real economy. ESG does not influence operating decision-making at a mine. Doesn't influence the procurement patterns for shipping at Maersk. It might affect the cost of capital slightly at the corporate level, but it doesn't trickle down to the decision-making. At BlackRock, Larry Fink is the champion for, it was until this year, the champion for ESG. If you talk to a portfolio manager at BlackRock, who's got a fiduciary responsibility for $1 trillion portfolio, he does not have the tools to figure out what should be in or out of my portfolio. Everything BlackRock is doing is sort of at the financial system level and at the corporate level, but it is not aiding real estate a little bit, but it's not affecting portfolio managers' day-to-day decisions because he's got a fiduciary responsibility and he'll get sued if he can't prove to his investors that his stewardship of that capital from ESG non-compliant investments to ESG compliance actually did the job he's supposed to do, which is steward their capital. That's a huge problem that we don't spend enough time about. How do you meet a fiduciary responsibility in ReFi? How do you justify the fact that you're taking in capital, especially if we did passive income investment in ReFi and you start taking trillions of dollars into ReFi, and now you've got a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that you're stewarding that money as expected. what's the protocols for that? We're not even talking about that. So these are very real, kind of real economy things that we haven't yet matured to do, but are going to bite us in the butt if we don't get connected to them. So this is what I think is kind of the money slide, by the way. And I don't know that we understand this. This is what McKinsey calls the global balance sheet. And it's made up of, at least on the asset side, three things, which is in the financial sector, which is public and sort of private personal money. So governments, people. You have financial system, which is all the money that flows around, the grease that make the economies work. That's an investment bank and banks and all that stuff. And then you got the non-financial assets that sit in the real economy. About the same. 500 million or trillion, 500 trillion, 500 trillion. Liabilities on the other side, which is how all those things are put to work. And net, we're worth about $5 trillion as a global economy. Or 10 trillion. The interesting thing is these two largely in service to the real economy. So the financial markets if the 10 trillion is out there to provide the grease that makes the real economy work. Every ship they get, every load of iron ore that moves across the ocean, every car that gets bought, so it's deeper service to that. So if we're not changing the real economy, we're not moving changing the way these work, and ReFi fit that here. So towards ReFi, we need to pull them towards ReFi, parts in what they're investing in. So again, we got to be thinking about what tapper is future invest, what's the $10, and how do we influence this? And again, that is, how do we finance ship? If ships are complicated. Let's get mines are complicated. How do we finance a bushel of Buffett? How do we a bushel of apples moves through this economy in a way that owes regenerative activities along the way? We can solve that problem by all of our tools together. We can go from a crop of apples to the global apple market. We can go from what they've done in coffee, where coffee moves around the world today. There is shitty coffee that moves around very unsustainably. And there is really high value coffee that moves around very unsustainably, but it gets a massive premium because that industry has figured out how to separate the price for quality coffee from the price for shitty coffee. They haven't done that in regenerative agriculture. They haven't done that. When you try to buy a low carbon intensity bushel of apples, your price is going to start with what's the cost of a shitty bushel of apples and how much can I smash down the excess cost of that. But if you say no, how it works, sure. The thing you're really investing in is the long-term sustainability of your apple supply. That's going to cost you this much. That's what you mostly pay for, and then you get your apples on top of it. You got to change the conversation around, and I'm happy to dig into that. It's a little abstract. So, this gets to this one. Like, there's a real economy out there, and again, I put all these ones that I don't think we're going to be missing for whiles by one gas and everything for heat up the food service. Tipping caught in that. What? Ride it? How we move goods around the world? Really dinner the up. Management of the system, we're seeing it already with rather the giant trucking companies out there, owned by giant end corporations, starting to see a much more connected shipping, the back and source efficient movement of goods and all that. Was the idea of moving from centralized control to decentralized control. You at the numbers.
How is until they count?
He thought all our tools to think about labor moves around the housing market. Think about how they get paid, or think about how the buyer buys the house and connects directly to the contractor to incentivize the contractor to build the house he wants versus the house some intermediary wants to sell it. Like, just tons of opportunities, and every step of the way pulls through finance. Contractor needs financing to prepay his employees at his own house for his estate. Elmer needs mortgage finance, needs insurance. All those things that exist today in the real economy need to be replicated, but with an eye towards regenerative value. And I would rather see a lot of us start moving towards how do I build regen for homeowners rather than how do I try to figure out regen, refi, really, with the difference from the problem. What we're doing, this is the only thing I'm going to mention about Digital Gaia, is that this whole need to be able to measure and compare whether you're delivering a return on your investment is going to be critical to this. So how do you, upfront in the beginning of any effort, anything, say, here's the baseline, here's the facts, and here's what, and allow people to collaborate, say, what are the practices I should put together to make a more regenerative farm, to make a more sustainable trucking company. So how do you do collaborative planning on a baseline set of common data that everybody can agree on that includes the buyer? Buy side signals in here. You can start saying what much the trend did to my farm to deliver carbon intensity products or more biodiversity friendly products. And you can see whether that's going to be a cost to margin blow in the tank. If it's not, you're not going to do it. Buyers can see, well, if I want that, but it's going to cost as much, they have at least that much. We need this kind of environment. We're trying to build that kind of life to try optionality and let people probe into the facts to say, there's a very high confidence that this farm's practice is delivering the pharrell you're expecting, but there's low confidence that it did. I mean, it shouldn't be created. Does that mean it should be? Yes, the department to transition by the price to somebody that wants high impact track out additionality. I guarantee there's a buyer out for it. I just don't know what he wants to pay. How do you fully parameterize impact so that people can say, here's what I'm looking for, here's what I can sell, and how do we match markets based on confidence rather than precision? Here are a set of companies that I would suspect are at the cusp of actually trying to invest in a regenerative transition. They've got brands that are leading the way as regenerative brands. So this is the demand side, at least in ag. It's driven by some compliance stuff, but it's also driven by business. So this is not just a pure, God forbid, if you want to sell apples in my union, you got to sell these kind of apples. It is a little bit of that. And if a lot of somebody saying, I don't have a clear perspective of what my apple supply looks like in 5 years, I got a problem I got to solve. And they're coming together to say, how do I do this? And I think ReFi and the ReFi solutions could do this, but we have to be in the conversation. So I'll just conclude, and I've probably gone over, it says an hour and 48 minutes. I would suggest that as a community, we need to engage in the economy, make ourselves relevant to the real economy. Think about your pitches and think about whether your product would make sense to somebody that didn't know without a lot of explanation. Invest in change in the real economy. Try to find a thing in the real economy you want to change. Figure out what the benefits are to the real economy. Partner with the real economy. And lastly, carbon markets are in no way the real economy. There is no connection to anything in the carbon markets, anything that happens in the real economy here. There's an intention that there is, but I don't think you could do that, and Marcus and I will have a debate on. So I will stop there. I probably went over from there on the clock. So.